Right, you talked about how the seeds of the book came around 2016, and then, of course, over the years, many other themes developed, like the anti-Asian violence that was rising in the pandemic. How did witnessing what was happening around the world and trying to process it at the same time shape your storytelling in this book?
Yeah, I had always been thinking about what it was like to be an Asian American because growing up as a Chinese American in places where there weren't very many other Asian Americans, I grew up in Pittsburgh and then in Cleveland. I think I've always been aware of the fact that people will sometimes look at me and see me as an outsider, even though I feel like I'm at home. And I wanted to look at how hard it was to overcome that gap between how you see yourself and how other people see you. And one of the things that seeing so much anti-Asian violence happening in the wake of the pandemic really brought home to me that this was something that I felt like I had to look at straight in the face. It was something that I wanted to acknowledge and witness and not shy away from. I wanted other people to recognize this is a real thing that happens.
You know, that reminds me of a scene in your book, and I don't want to, I'm so careful not to spoil anything, but there's a scene that was very jarring to me because it came out kind of suddenly for me, yet it really captured the violence that all of us had been witnessing against our Asian American communities, particularly the elderly. And the way you described it, the way you really framed it, you didn't hold back. Did that willingness to really shine the light on what was happening, is that kind of how that affected your decisions on sort of how to tell those sorts of moments?
It did. I wasn't sure how much I wanted to talk about anti-Asian violence in the book. It isn't something that I want to think about. It's something that, that honestly, it scares me. But it did feel like when there were so many stories in the news, we were seeing this right out in the open. We were seeing attacks on elderly people in many cities across the country. We were seeing it happening in broad daylight. And scariest to me was we were seeing people who would just watch and let these things happen. There was one particular incident that happened in New York in Midtown where there was an Asian person who was stomped on in the middle of the day. And that was terrifying to see. It was all caught on security camera. But I think the scariest thing was that nobody did anything except for the doorman at the building that they were in front of. And he came out and he closed the door. And that to me was really chilling. That, like you said, I think really gave me the push to say, okay, I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to show this because it feels like it's something that needs to be acknowledged.